Good morning, and thanks for taking the time to join us today. We've, for the May Housing Hive this year, we very cleverly booked this for half-term week, so we're going to probably be a little bit quiet today. But still plenty of people registered, and obviously we'll record it and things so we can share it with you all afterwards if needs be. But yeah, thanks for taking the time to join us today. We'll get started shortly, but I suppose the general sort of purpose of today's session is, again, as we like to do, we sort of base these webinars on what we hear about in the space, and certainly at the moment we're sort of having to work through with our clients, helping them sort of demonstrate budget utilization around cost-effective digital strategies, and talk to them about where and how value can be shown on digital strategy. So that's the purpose of today. Hopefully to give you a little bit of insight into a few things which you're probably already considering, to be honest, but maybe validate some of those things and maybe hopefully give you some new information around digital strategies and sort of elements of that strategy, which is essentially a more cost-effective way to approach certain things. So yeah, we'll make a start. Short introduction we'll start with. We'll go into the main sort of topic of today, as I say, is cost-effective digital strategies, which kind of feeds on from some of our prior topics that we've sort of run on the webinar. And then, yeah, we'll go into a Q&A stage towards the end as well. We have had a couple through from people who've registered already, which we'll look to address at that point. But yeah, if anyone's got any throughout that you'd like to sort of raise with us, please feel free to pop them into the chat, and me and Livy will sort of come to those towards the end. But yeah, feel free to do so, and we'll answer the ones that we can. So yeah, I suppose to begin with, again, good morning, thank you all for coming today. My name's Jacob, I'm head of sales at Prodo, but get really involved in delivering this sort of session, sort of hosting the Housing Hive with sometimes guest speakers, talking about particular topics. We always look to base these on trends and sort of challenges, ambitions we're hearing in the space. But yeah, we're Prodo, essentially. We're a digital transformation partner in the housing space. And I suppose throughout our tenure of 20 plus years working in the sector on digital transformation projects, we've seen little brackets and sort of pockets of change significantly when it comes to the needs and ambitions of digital solutions in the sector, from, I suppose, originally the growth of more sophisticated web platforms, the whole sort of housing management system market, and how that was and sort of, I suppose, still is quite dominated by a select few. And I suppose now, well, we had a session last month on the rise of the sort of the true CRM in the sector. And then I suppose into the almost like that sort of middle phase around everybody seemingly looking to push and, I suppose, in some ways kind of force channel shift, with things now so more being focused on provision of choice for customers based on preferences, with a critical point of sort of demonstrating return on investment and sort of showing value quite early, due to, you know, evolving customer demands, due to things like internal capacity strains and those sorts of things. I've got Livia with me today. Do you want to say a quick hello, Liv, and a short introduction?
Yeah, I'm Liv. I'm account director here at Prodo, so I look after a whole range of clients, focusing on kind of mostly cost effective being a top topic at the moment, and making sure we get the most for our money. So really excited for today's session. Thanks, Jake.
Thanks, Liv. Okay, so we'll get cracking then. Now, if you've been to one of our housing hives before, or a recent sort of presentation with us, you'll recognise this slide. We use it quite a lot, but it's really important for us to, I suppose, recognise and I suppose just touch upon the fact that the multifaceted challenges that is facing the housing sector at the moment, and this kind of feeds into today's topic quite nicely, from, you know, navigating the need for decarbonisation, grappling with the pressure of sort of ongoing cost of living crisis. Every housing association we work with, and probably in the country, is having to operate in quite a complex environment at the moment. You know, building safety remains paramount, and that's, I suppose, compounded by the need of having to balance things like demands around asset investment, whilst also sort of making sure you're dealing with the regulatory sort of changes. And all the while, those things are sort of feeding into the fact that reduced revenue streams and, you know, more expensive, I suppose, higher cost borrowing can constrain certain elements around digital transformation and an ability to innovate. So we've essentially designed today's webinar around that those sort of facts and those challenges. So what we're going to do is hopefully explore some digital strategies that will help you empower to do more with less, navigate through that complexity, embrace the change still, and ultimate goal of looking to essentially build some capacity and address that within a rapidly evolving sort of landscape as a whole. So a quick overview of what we're going to be touching on today is going to be basically starting with incremental changes and their impact, moving on to cloud-based platforms, looking into automation, data-driven decision making, and sort of everything that goes along with that, as well as things that we look to sort of touch upon when we do run things like digital capabilities assessments and those sorts of things, is essentially looking to sort of improve and work more with what you already have, as well as the potential benefit of strategic outsourcing for certain things, and on the whole, how you sort of evaluate and monitor return on investment on these things as well. So now, obviously, digital strategies in the housing space and sort of across the board generally can take many different forms, but I guess now, as I sort of say, around that sort of context, it's more important than ever to be able to show returns on that investment into digital and demonstrate that budget is being utilised effectively and benefiting users, whether that be internal or even external for customers. It's definitely something we felt as a supplier into the space. We'll always sort of have our, we have like a custom development sort of element of what we do here at Prodo, but also we're actively moving more towards sort of a product organisation, so we can be a little bit more efficient and offer things that are needed in the space a bit quicker and for less capital investment for our clients as well. So it's something we're having to respond to ourselves as well. Now, it's worth noting that certain elements of what we're running through today is informed by the book that we published a few years ago called Shift. It's based upon our own research into the sector and digital transformation fed into by various different sort of clients and our friends in the space as well. You can download a copy of it if you prefer to, using the link, which is prodo.com/shift, or even if you prefer a hard copy, it's available on Amazon as well. Or if you come and see us at one of the events that we're coming to soon, we'll give you one as well. But yeah, elements of today are sort of informed by parts of that book, essentially. So on to the first part of today, which is around incremental changes then. So this is partly around, if you think about small sort of adjustments which are made consistently over time, leading to significant improvements in the digital infrastructure as a whole. So thinking of it around small steps towards a wider, larger goal. Now, from a high level, all projects from a digital point of view, and I suppose outside digital as well, are built up of incremental change, incremental tasks, specific tasks, and output leading to a particular goal. The decision around this comes to where you actually see that sort of go live around that technology piece. Is it after 2-3 years of effort and development, after that sort of prior agreed scope was put in place and everything's done and completed, launching at that point? Or is it much earlier when the quick wins, the really high value pieces are ready, and then launch it at that point, followed by a testing phase, learning from that sort of live environment after only actually committing a certain fraction of resource and investment to it as well? So that more incremental approach to change means that you can show value a bit quicker. It helps sort of breed that perception of continued progress rather than sort of large delays and then like a big bang at the end, which obviously is beneficial, but things could probably change throughout. So it means that it unlocks that sort of agile approach to adapting to change in the scope, essentially, which is going to happen for various reasons, rather than sort of moving through a large scale project and then realizing maybe when it's too late, something has to be adjusted. From a prioritization perspective of sort of work in the digital space, we like to use the term MVP, so minimum viable product, with a backlog of potential future enhancements to sort of happen after. And that really sort of forces you to focus on the elements you actually need to get over the line, and also sort of identify which of those maybe are more of a nice to have, or maybe have a less sort of level of importance and maybe will show value, but are less important to get over the line quicker. So if I think about an example, which obviously you know a little bit more about than me, Liv, so feel free to feed into this, but we've worked with PA Housing as a client for many years now, going back to even sort of pre-merger, working with Asra before they merged with Paragon and obviously became PA. So we delivered a customer portal at that stage, which we got up and running really quickly, quick to launch MVP platform with core functionality, which we actually already had. It's just a case of sort of integrating it. And then over time, sort of post-launch, after sort of learning about how customers use it, internal needs and how they sort of evolve and change, done things like integrate dynamics for messaging. We had a front-end redesign, obviously sort of post-merger when that sort of brand changed. And together with that, there was additional repairs contractor integrations we had to put in place. We've incorporated things like compliance documentation from internal systems, adding a neighbourhood champion experience as well, and loads more over the years. So that's been quite a true case, I suppose, of incremental change with, frequent updates over the years. And in terms of results attached to that, the last time we checked, it was really promising and obviously a great case study. Reason for mentioning it: 70% of customers registered, roughly a third of repairs coming through it, like 1.4 to 1.5 million pounds worth of rent coming through it monthly. So I suppose just going back to the title and sort of purpose of today's session, if we were to go back and sort of look at, okay, the MyPA portal now, what that does and the functionality it has, if we were going to say, okay, PA, this is our quote and this is our timeline to do that, it's going to take a hell of a lot longer and it's going to take a larger upfront investment to get that sort of in place, which is obviously more difficult from an internal point of view. There's more resource that need to be committed, but also, I suppose together with that, some of the additions that we've made have only been put in place because of things that we've learned about on that sort of live portal. So we wouldn't have known about them at that point as well, which kind of feeds back into that sort of being able to adapt to potential scope changes and putting things in place off the back of that to basically benefit the users off the back of assessing how people use it.
I think just to add to that, in terms of how we work with clients such as PA, and Stockport is another really good example of this, is that we have kind of a road mapping session quite regularly where we will look at kind of a really grand wish list from every department, every section of the business wants this and this. We'll evaluate kind of what those quick wins might be, which are kind of longer term. And usually when we end up revisiting that road mapping document, after even as short a period as 2 months, we'll say, actually, this and this is no longer required. And actually, if you'd have committed all of that budget and that time and that kind of energy into scoping and resourcing of that project, and then got kind of to the point of deployment a few months down the line, say if it was a bigger project, and then realised it's not a priority, we're then wasting budget. So it's really important that we go through that process continually, and kind of that iterative change is based on kind of demand from the customer, demand internally, and then kind of the risk, the cost versus effort estimate that we have. So it's kind of it's a really nice way of working that is becoming more kind of common across the sector, I'd say.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think it is one of those things which probably feels, on the face of it, probably feels more appropriate for certain projects than others. But even when I think about some examples in the sector at the moment, where we're talking with clients who are doing things like integrating a new CRM, which obviously from a high level is a massive change and a huge project start to finish. But quite often I'm hearing things like, okay, we're incorporating a new CRM, our current system has to stay in place whilst that happens. What we'll do is we'll just sort of incorporate and launch the certain workflows first. And usually I've heard a few times that people are starting with the complaints process there around sort of accepting them and the automation around sort of responding to them for different levels. So even something like a really large scale internal system implementation can be approached in an incremental manner. Some things obviously you'll need to sort of launch as one, but I think it's worth considering from an incremental launch perspective, more agile approach, just to sort of test certain things and hopefully get the output of that benefit and the value a little bit sooner as well.
I think just to quickly add to that, it's kind of everyone that works in this sector will know when you kind of implement big systems, those timelines are never quite as we expect. If everything goes to plan, then you're one of very few. So I think from planning in terms of those smaller wins along the way, it's not kind of then got a massive dependency on that other project as well. So you don't kind of stall your digital development based on another part of the business, although they are very much intertwined.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thanks, Steph. So moving on to the next point then, which feels almost like a little bit of a given from a cloud-based solutions perspective, but not everyone in the space, and certainly outside of the space as well, is fully migrated to the cloud as of yet, still with some on-premise servers and infrastructure managed internally, which, from our perspective as a digital solutions provider, sometimes we have to integrate with these things, so we're quite familiar with them still existing. But cloud-based solutions bring all sorts of different benefits to the association. It is quite a compelling option for we're talking about cost-effective digital strategies. So the first one being scalability as a major benefit. Cloud services let you scale up resources that you need up or down based on needs without having to invest and sort of put projects in place for physical infrastructure and sort of having to manage that. So that means that you can quite easily adapt to changing demands, which is also inevitable, without having to go through significant upfront costs or things like a wait for implementation. When it comes to cost effectiveness specifically, certain cloud providers let you operate on a pay-as-you-go model, which obviously kind of does what it says in the tin, but means that you're paying for the resources that you use, which can be a significant cost saving. So if you compare that to a more traditional on-premise infrastructure, where you essentially have to invest and implement systems infrastructure to cover basically the worst case scenario, when in reality that worst case scenario is probably going to be quite rare, but you need to be prepared for it anyway, so you have to invest in infrastructure to cope with that, versus pay as you go or the scalability of sort of moving up or down as you need it. And I suppose attached to that is that these solutions will often come with things like enhanced security as part of them. So leading providers like AWS, Azure and Google invest really obviously quite heavily into advanced security measures to protect things like data, protect things like your applications that are hosted on there, which is obviously a highly important piece around digital implementations about the housing sector, particularly at the moment, some of which being informed by some worrying stories of breaches and things in the space over the last few months and years, something which, again, we're kind of seeing quite a lot more and more when it comes to requirements and tenders and things that we see and responding to with clients. So, or even when we're running through consultancy sort of services and have to ascertain priority around digital, obviously security is a big one, which always sort of forms part of that, with customer data being part of the housing association. And then, the general sort of operational efficiency gained, it's going to allow IT teams to focus on strategic projects rather than having to look after routine maintenance. And also it'll come with things like disaster recovery and backups solutions in place as well to make sure not only the data is safe, but you can sort of access it and recover it if needs be without quite expensive redundant systems. We're actually finding more and more of our clients at the moment reporting on their digital estate and infrastructure from a sustainability angle as well, and things like ESG reports. I suppose obviously the main part of this is energy efficiency in the homes themselves and sort of decarbonisation and the properties. But if you can show sustainability by using things like Azure, which is net zero, obviously that's a big plus on the whole generally. But I think just to sort of summarise, it's beneficial for the flexibility angle, the scalability of sort of resources up and down, and cost efficiency around potential sort of payment methods around that as well, which ultimately means that your teams internally can focus on the tenants and the internal processes that you need to sort of facilitate the service delivery, which is obviously forefront of everyone's minds, and the things like infrastructure, security and data are almost sort of kind of looked after by the technology for you, I suppose. So that's that one. Moving on to the next one is automation, which is obviously quite a broad topic and quite a broad statement to sort of touch upon, but it is a piece which significantly transforms how we can operate generally, really. So making processes more efficient and reducing potential for errors. So the first one being around sort of human error. So automating repetitive and routine tasks is going to minimise the chance of mistakes that can occur when dealing with sort of manual data entry and sort of handling data, which leads to more accurate and reliable data. It means that you can use it better. So there's many occasions where we've gone through things like capabilities assessments and looking at tech stack audits and things to hear the words, people are finding workarounds internally with this system, or we're actually finding that people are inputting incorrect data into these fields. So now we can't report on it. We can't see certain elements of customer segments that are suffering with problem X, or certain remits of the properties which have problem X. So it's another way of sort of automating and sort of putting measures in place around data health as well. But linked to that, reducing or even removing that data keying or rekeying is obviously a huge benefit from a capacity point of view as well. It's very, very time consuming manual data entry, and the likelihood is the person doing it probably has some sort of expertise or knowledge that really should be used doing something else of higher value for the organisation. So automation around these things obviously can handle it quickly, accurately, free people up to focus on more critical things like supporting customers directly. And I suppose linked to what we hear quite a lot at the moment from clients and people that we speak to in the space is we need to create internal capacity here. We have a lot to do. We're having to do more with less. So that automation of tasks will let you redeploy staff into areas where their expertise can be utilised better, which is going to boost productivity on the whole generally, but enhances job satisfaction as well. So we've heard that an anecdote quite a while ago, but it's still quite a nice one to hear, in that we were working with a HA down in the southeast, and off the back of enhanced digital engagement from the automation of, actually it was the applications process of new customers and sort of assessing them and onboarding them, their staff reported back that they're actually doing the job that they applied for, and the sort of the aspect of the role that is more important to them, helping people and looking after people, rather than just accepting an application, rekeying it into somewhere, passing paper from desk to desk. So it's sort of multifaceted benefits, but it's obviously a big part of automation for us, from our point of view, being a customer portal provider, having apps and sort of working on websites, those sorts of things, is self-service in and of itself, is sort of an element of automation. It's a game changer when it comes to giving customers the platforms and the tools they need to do things like manage their tenancy around paying rent, managing repairs requests, and it kind of aligns, well, it does align very nicely with customer experience sort of demands and sort of how they change over time, but also reducing the workload on certain things for certain elements of support teams as well. So rather than absolutely everybody having to report things in the exact same way, regardless of ability or preference, it opens up that channel of choice we mentioned at the start, and kind of, again, lets the technology just sort of look after and deal with those people who actually would prefer digital and probably have been asking for it as well. It will allow things like, it allows the self-service angle and the creation of capacity and customer experience improvements, but it will always rely upon the technology itself allowing that integration of systems and the secure passage of data through them, which we know is probably another topic and probably another challenge in the space that we sort of hear of quite a lot. As it is, our system doesn't allow certain elements of automation, or we can't integrate it with X or Y, and prove quite difficult to get data in or out. And that kind of feeds into a topic we ran last month, which is we are seeing a bit of a rise in sort of true CRM systems in the space at the minute, with the likes of, Dynamics in some ways, but also the likes of HubSpot and Salesforce and everything that sort of surrounds that as well, rather than just the sort of the typical housing systems, which are, not CRMs, but people try to use them as CRMs. But another thing I think this relies upon is, or sort of kind of feeds into it, is that it's all about basically identifying data to execute relevant processes. So looking for the correct data points and using the information to trigger certain appropriate actions. So for example, from our point of view, again, we use AI for things like diagnosing a problem from a repairs point of view, linking that to an SOR code, and then therefore returning the most available slots for that particular problem. But what's really important from an automation point of view is that it is only appropriate for certain things, and it should be used to support processes to incorporate human interaction at the right point. Not everything should be automated, particularly in the space we all operate in. And digital by default, which is the sort of digital buzzword that we hear about in the space, is a no-go. Really, it's not something that can be just sort of blanket put across the board. Some processes crucially will need that human interaction to sort of apply empathetic handling and those sorts of things. It should be a support of human interaction and sort of human support, I suppose, which helps maintain that relationship and isn't completely faceless, I guess. So that's the sort of the automation side of things. So the next one is data-driven decision-making, which is kind of linked to lots of this as a whole, really. So digital strategy in the housing space, and obviously outside as well, is influenced by many, many different factors. But the main worry with it is that you're committing resources and committing spend and investment without seeing the actual benefits, when you absolutely need to show that those funds are being invested well. And that's where this data-driven decision-making comes in and becomes quite crucial. So basing decisions on data, you can actually focus efforts and needs in the areas which you have higher confidence in, it's going to sort of return positive results. So as another sort of anecdotal example, we launched a customer portal with Rochdale Borough-wide Housing a few years ago. As you can imagine, it was a significant project, significant launch, comprehensive communications plan around it. The goal being, obviously, we're going to launch this platform. Comms plan will sort of make people aware of it. Customers will see it will start signing up, start managing their tenancies digitally because that's what they've been asking for. It's going to reduce strain on the contact center and so on, which is obviously usually the sort of the goals behind these things in self-service generally. But the adoption rate was actually quite slower, a lot slower than we were originally anticipated. So in that case, we've got the portal up and live. People should be aware of it because we've attempted to contact them and let them know. Where do you focus the spend at that point? Is it further marketing communications? Is it putting sort of signage on the vans and the properties and sort of publicising things that way? Maybe the platform is incorrect. Maybe it should have been an app rather than a web portal. All of these questions sort of come to the fore. But we worked together to address the problem around this, and we looked at the very first step of the process. So, okay, where's the potential blockers in this sort of process around registrations, around adoption? So we focused in on that registration process specifically, looking at the traffic, looking at page visits, successful registrations, where the user journey sort of tends to drop off. And we found that the specifics in there were that people are actually struggling with the date picker field when putting the date of birth in, and also having to go away and find their tenancy reference on a letter or on an email or whatever it might be. So on that data-driven decision, based upon those sort of concerns, specific tweaks in that sort of process were made. And then quite quickly, registrations went up by 200%. Conversions on the registration page went up by over 500%. And that's a really good example of looking at the problem, using the data to decide what to do next. And it might even be a small tweak, or again, going back to that incremental changes from earlier, to sort of yield some really good results and sort of provide that value a bit quicker. And then the byproduct of that is going to be that you build trust with colleagues, with the end user, with customers on the front end as well, because the changes you make are proven to help from an internal point of view, or even external as well, because that's another, it's another resistant part of change, isn't it? Around, okay, these changes are actually going to help. It's going to help me in my job. It's going to help customers, etc. So delivering things based upon data and therefore more likely to succeed builds that trust generally and sort of encourages buy-in as a whole around data-driven decision making, I suppose.
I think just to add to that, there was kind of commonly that clients will look to get data through not only kind of the numbers in terms of GA, but also in terms of things like Hotjar, like RBH did. But we've got quite a few clients who will go kind of continuously through quarter by quarter and have a look at that Hotjar feedback. And it could be things as simple as making a change from a terminology point of view that helps with the kind of conversion of certain kind of goals within the website. So it is a really interesting thing. I think there's benefit in getting all the kind of the numbers and the facts and the figures, but also kind of that more oversight data and also the kind of qualitative data from things like surveys. It might also pick up problems in different business areas that might not relate to the website that you would not have known about unless you kind of did those kind of activities. So a really worthwhile activity we found with lots of clients.
Yeah, because otherwise, what are you basing the decision on? Is it, sometimes it's a case of, there's internal preferences based upon maybe certain systems that people have used in the past or previous roles, or there's maybe pressure from exec level or above, and we need to make these specific changes here and here. But then looking into the data shows that actually the sort of focus needs to be in this particular area, because the data is telling us that change is going to benefit colleagues and customers the most. So it's another one to sort of inform those sorts of things as well, I suppose. So the next point is optimizing existing technology. It's a really effective way of helping to maximize what you already have without having to invest into something new. So, and the way we like to approach this, because we do quite a lot of consultancy services around things like tech stack audits and sort of how things are being utilized right now, is auditing what's in place now, because quite often there's things that are underutilized, or there may be some hidden capabilities in those systems which haven't been realized just yet. And I think the point on that is, what we've found is it's not always the technology itself that's the problem. It's quite often elements of configuration, or how it's been set up, or how it's integrated or not integrated with other systems as well, which can create those sort of silos and inefficiencies and sort of manual workarounds and things. That sort of fixing those elements are going to lead to lower cost change and potential benefits as well. But a big thing in that is the likes of integrations between systems, which, the amount of housing systems we've had to assess before building a portal for them and integrating with them is huge. And what we tend to find is, okay, yes, we've done a capita integration here, and here, and we've done Civica CX here, and here. So we can, we can be confident we've done that before, but when we get in there and have a look, they're all a little bit different, all configured slightly different, which means we need to tailor the implementation. And the reason for that is that these systems will have probably been implemented a few years ago, and therefore the implementation of that and sort of configuration, how it's set up and how it needs to be used, and probably the functionality available is probably different to what it was when it was originally implemented. But we've all heard the stories, haven't we, around things like RPs investing quite heavily into the likes of a sort of a large-scale Dynamics implementation, only to realise that a little bit later on, making the platform work for them, there's more work needed and therefore more investment needed, more time needed, which we've even heard stories, probably all of us here, that housing associations have actually just cut their losses, backed out of that project and gone elsewhere and sort of looked to sort of reevaluate it. But you get to that stage, don't you, whereby you're already a year or two in, you've already spent £1 million. So that conversation around pivoting at that point, is a difficult one. What do we do now? We're already sort of halfway in here. It's all well and good saying that these projects are going to sort of fix everything, but in reality, it's a case of probably something you could have fixed possibly with an internal change, and that kind of is influenced by the new shiny tool concept, isn't it? In terms of there's something new come to market, there's a nice polished sales pitch, new technology, and sometimes it promises to solve all your problems when in reality, you need to make sure that there's possible tangible benefit in there, and sometimes sticking with what you have is a more cost-effective way to do things. And that's not to say that we shouldn't be thinking about blue sky thinking or the big picture or another sort of typical agency type digital phrase, but it's you still focus on ambitious transformational projects, but it's about balancing that change with and the investment around it with what the potential return is and when the benefit can happen, because it could be that there's certain things internally to look at now to provide value whilst you maybe scope the bigger project and incrementally sort of release that a little bit later on. So the next point is from an outsourcing point of view, which obviously is coming from us as a supplier which people outsource certain elements to. But the benefits of this is that, and there is, this kind of differs based upon housing association size in some ways, doesn't it? Sometimes the larger have the bigger teams to be able to do certain things in-house, and therefore but also have larger budgets to sort of commit to outsourcing potentially, but it does give you that access, or quicker access, I should say, to highly specialised expertise that may not be readily available in-house. And that can be quite crucial for addressing certain things or making the most of opportunities without the need of an extensive hiring process or the training phase, that sort of ramp-up phase of bringing someone in, getting familiar with the systems, getting familiar with the processes, and then sort of providing value months later. It could be that there's complex comms campaign or particular piece of technology needs integrating, whatever it might be, whereby internally it simply isn't possible, and therefore in that case spending on strategic outsourcing is probably a good idea. It will mitigate that sort of ramp-up phase, as we say. If there is a solution which is needed quite quickly, that outsourcing approach can bypass some of that in terms of recruiting, onboarding and sort of training. Instead, you get access to essentially a dedicated extended team, if you like, if the sort of relationship works in that way, who are ready to hit the ground running, provide value quickly and accelerate things which maybe need to be accelerated a little bit quicker. It can let you benefit from partner with somebody who has quite a lot of industry or sector knowledge as well, experience working with similar organisations, working on similar projects to the one you're sort of considering as well, and therefore has been through some of the challenges which you're probably going to go through yourselves if you try and do it internally as well, which could lead to a bit of a smoother collaboration, faster outcomes in terms of benefit. But it could be the case that there's certain things that could be done internally, you just need sort of certain elements of outsourcing support for. But one point we tend to sort of touch upon when we do talk about outsourcing, when we run these projects ourselves, is, let you focus on your day job whilst we do ours, sort of thing, because it's a case of everyone's very, very busy. And if you trust a partner to do certain things to sort of deliver for you, it means that you're probably going to have the time to do things that your original job was set up to do, and therefore focus on the things that an outsourced team essentially can't do, because it's too sort of ingrained into the business essentially. But this does, the sort of case around this does require an acceptance of internal capability as well. So it can give you that valuable support and expertise, but I think it takes a process of understanding certainly where possible limitations might be internally, and therefore acting upon that rather than just sort of hoping to be able to address things by everybody sort of internally, and then only finding out too late that it's actually, we need some external help here. But the success of it obviously hinges on picking the right partner. So research into that, whether that be experience, capabilities, specific expertise, alignment on values and sort of cultures and things as well, which obviously a lot of this, if it's certainly a new provider or a new partner, will be done essentially by the public sector procurement processes, which I suppose places more emphasis on getting that right as well, that evaluation, sort of comparing agency A, B and C, or partner A, B and C with one another. And the sort of success of a partner will hinge upon picking the right one, obviously. And another one which is, I suppose, worth mentioning is looking at sort of software as a service or SaaS solutions compared to bespoke solutions. I think particularly in the housing space, there's obviously lots of housing associations out there trying to address challenges which are quite similar, with specific nuances, maybe in slightly different ways. And I think there's been a bit of a trend of people sort of being convinced that their internal scenario is very, very unique and therefore something that needs to be completely built from the ground up. When in reality, there's probably a SaaS solution out there which may give you, 80, 85, 90% of what you need from a technology point of view. So it's definitely worth considering, because it's going to give you value quicker in terms of quicker to launch. It's going to give you access to probably a technology piece which has been invested into and contributed to maybe by a wider community, and sort of tested and tried and tested with organisations probably similar to yourselves. They'll usually have things like a single subscription model to handle things like the software itself, like updates, like hosting, maintenance, and even sort of new feature rollout and things as well, which is an inclusive approach and helps sort of simplify budget commitments as well, and sort of reducing sort of capital expenditure. Maybe putting that on the ongoing side of things instead. But it means you're probably going to consistently get the likes of new updates and things without having to go through, okay, this is our brief, these are the changes we need to make, go away, sort of estimate the project itself, and then a big project plan to get that up and running and built, and then changing it over time with further sort of investment. So it's a different approach. It will mean that a certain level of flexibility will sort of be the focus will be on sort of ease of use and single subscription and getting things up and running quickly, compared with full end-to-end flexibility. But again, it might be the case that that's kind of all you need for that particular output. It is that kind of trade-off around flexibility versus speed and sort of ease of use, I suppose.
I think you really do get to benefit as well from the wider kind of community in terms of thinking about our kind of SaaS portal specifically. We will have kind of groups of people feeding into that roadmap, and actually what that roadmap then gives you is kind of an overview of the problems that we have within the sector. And usually, as you said, those aren't unique, and actually by kind of grouping together and putting our heads together in terms of the best solution for that, we come up with a solution that works for everyone. There might be kind of niche scenarios that we have to work around, of course, but that's something that we can then do more easily because the foundation is already there and built.
Yeah, it's usually the case for us, isn't it, that the nuances or the specifics or uniqueness is the integration, basically, isn't it? The sort of the interface and the functionality needed is probably quite similar. It's so the integration piece, which we mentioned before, can carry their own sort of levels of challenges, I suppose. But no, thanks, Liv. And then the final point today is around monitoring and evaluating ROI. Now, this is a key element of the book that I mentioned earlier. Monitoring and evaluating the return on investment for digital is obviously crucial for ensuring accountability, guiding the decision-making process and demonstrating the impact. Why that's important is the accountability piece helps drive transparency and helps keep people accountable to what was sort of agreed, I suppose, and also helps demonstrate where that investment's been spent and if it's been spent wisely as well, and maybe certain initiatives which have worked and therefore could maybe do with some further investment, and some on the other side of that, maybe certain elements which the original idea was there and there was some data there, but the investment has proved maybe less beneficial than some others, and therefore maybe take some spend from there and put it elsewhere. So guiding that sort of decision-making process. And it's also, I suppose, key essentially for securing and getting that buy-in for future funding and support from stakeholders across the board for certain aspects as well. But I think when it does come to looking into KPIs and things to manage, obviously that's specific to the type of project or type of technology, looking at whether that be web-based stuff with the likes of GA and conversions, or whether it be internal systems which may help with reduction of call volumes or more efficient processes internally in certain things, but also the element of customer satisfaction as well, which is probably more qualitative than quantitative in some ways. Sort of getting that sentiment feedback from customers of how they're feeling about certain changes is obviously key, certainly when it comes to consumer regs and sort of being able to demonstrate that you're listening to customers and considering customer voice and acting upon it. The monitoring and evaluation of ROI and assessment of those KPIs feed perfectly into that. Obviously TSMs are their own sort of element of that, I suppose, around certain levels of service delivery. But I think it's this which lets you get to the point of a roadmap or digital change which feeds into the benefits you were hoping to get, and then therefore be able to sort of commit investment in a smart way and get more benefits in the future as well. Anything further from you, Liv, on that one?
I don't think so. I think you summarised that.
Okay, cool. I know we're coming up to quarter two, so they were the sort of the main points from today, guys. If anyone's got any questions in terms of specific queries that they want to sort of raise with me or Liv, and we can do our best to answer them, we will do. But we did have a couple through when we sort of initially listed this webinar topic. We tend to get people sort of asking things through the form or sort of elsewhere, looking for us to address them on here. So one of them was around the key challenges around implementing automation in the housing space specifically, and sort of overcoming them. And I think for us, it is a challenging aspect of digital because it relies upon there's some element of resistance potentially to change internally. There's quite often those legacy systems to integrate with, and like we were saying before, usually some sort of data quality problems as well. And all of those things feed into the success around automation as well. So I think when it comes to automation aspect of digital strategies, it needs to be going through that quite comprehensive change management sort of strategy and approach. It needs to make sure that stakeholders are brought on board in terms of engagement to sort of, I suppose, address that initial sort of buy-in, but also the investment and sort of upskilling around training, sort of demonstrating the potential benefit to people's jobs, or even on the other side of the fence, how it's going to benefit customers as well. But I think it's another case of that incremental change piece, which I know sort of blends 2 points we've made today, which is around implementing something maybe a little bit smaller, a little bit quicker, and sort of testing it, running pilots if possible, and then assessing the data and success of that, going back to that sort of KPI ROI piece, and then rolling out further points around that as well. So I'd say that would be how to address automation, if that answers the question that we got there. Anything further from you, Liv, on addressing automation and any sort of overcoming challenges that you've come across?
No, I don't think so. I think from an automation point of view, one of the things that we have seen a lot of is that the digital solution might not necessarily do all of the automation, but it will kind of feed into an internal system that then picks up the kind of next bit, which is quite an interesting thing, and actually working out how you get the data from the platform to kind of an internal system that might already be set up to deal with that functionality, or whether the website, portal, whatever it might be, has to do kind of everything within one. So there's kind of two different unique scenarios there, but something that we're familiar with discussing for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Another one we had was around sort of the SaaS side of things, which hopefully we sort of answered. But if anyone's got any further queries on that one, feel free to pop a note in. We can address it further if we need to. But we did have one around asking about examples for types of KPIs around that sort of ROI evaluation piece, sort of moving forwards as well. And I think we mentioned before, it will depend upon the type and the project itself that is being implemented, because it might be that the goal of that one is cost saving. It might be that it's the goal of that one is customer experience improvement. So I think for us, going back to examples of the types of projects we run and the products we have around portals and apps and sort of websites and things, quite often we'll work with our clients to look at things like percentage of customers registered, percentage of those who are active users, number or percentage of repairs reported digitally. And to go another level of that, what we look to try and do is look into the call volume data sort of attached to it as well, but kind of quite dig into that as well, because we've seen in the past that even when you see that sort of uptake and rise in digital engagement, the call volumes remain similar, but it's just the types of calls and the types of customers that are actually managing to get through changing. So I think it is quite a specific one in terms of what you need to be looking at in terms of sort of assessing the success of these things. But yeah, the data around different levels can sort of feed into that, I suppose. Any other questions, Liv, now so far?
No, just a statement from Rich Harvey saying automation's key, allows customers to check the status of any requests like dominoes, which I thought was a really good point. It is a kind of domino effect when it comes to these things, isn't it?
It is. And just going back into that call volume data piece, we did a project last year where we found that it was something along the lines of, because we were looking at call types essentially, and it was something along the lines of 60% of calls incoming were repairs, 40% of callbacks were repairs, but 50% of all of those things were about existing repairs rather than new. So yeah, that automation that sort of Rich has rightly put there around showing status changes and status updates is key to that particular piece itself, because it might be that someone's just raised something, they don't know where it's up to, and therefore have to manually get in touch, and someone has to manually respond. So the automation of, actually, we have the data of where this particular query or repair is up to in our system. So if we can just display that in some way, whether it be in a portal or some sort of notification, it's going to avoid that sort of manual input from customers and staff as well. So good point, Rich. Okay, brilliant. So before we do leave today, guys, once again, like we do every single year, we'll be exhibiting at Housing 24 in Manchester at the end of June. No shiny rocket caravan this year. We've got a slightly different stand this time. We're going to be partnering with our sister company Fulius, who joined us for the last webinar, last Housing Hive in April, which is all around sort of CRMs. They're an expert CRM partner. So they're going to be with us talking about CRMs in housing space and sort of automation around certain tasks and data segmentation and those sorts of things and outreach. And we'll obviously be there to talk about our portals, our apps, the websites, consultancy, anything else that you want to sort of discuss with us. We'll have a couple of speaker slots as well, which will pop on an email to you when and what we're talking about. But yeah, we'll be on stand F35 if anyone is going. Hopefully we shall see you there. And then finally, our next session, because we'll be at the event on the last Thursday of the month, which we usually do, Housing Hive Day, will be the very start of July, and that's going to be more focused on enhancing tenant engagement through digital channels. That's another piece that we're hearing quite a lot about that our clients are looking to address in different ways. The driver behind digital engagement with tenants and sort of tenant engagement specifically, and how to best address that with the likes of different digital channels. So hopefully we shall see you for that one, but feel free to head over and sign up using the form, and yeah, hopefully we'll see you there for that one as well. But no, thanks for your time, for taking time to join us today, listening to what we have to say. Hopefully it was helpful, and yeah, we'll see you in Manchester, and the week after, hopefully see you on the next Housing Hive as well. Thanks everyone. Thanks Liv. Thanks Rich.
Thank you.
Thanks guys.